Hey everyone, Alta of Wisdom speaking. Today we are reviewing the latest update of the GridFather version 1.4. Let's get on to it. Okay, here we go. So the first thing you're gonna have to do, and some DAWs, mainly those that don't allow for internal MIDI routing, is to set up, if you're running macOS, an IAC bus, or if you're running Windows, a loop MIDI interface. So these DAWs are mainly under OS X, gonna be Logic and Bitwig as well. There is some internal routing in Bitwig, but at least in the latest version I've had in my hand, you couldn't monitor what was being sent in the MIDI routing. So you couldn't listen actually to the thing playing, you can only record that, so it's a bit of a pain. So let's see how we do that. So the simplest way is under macOS is to open the audio and MIDI setup. So that's audio MIDI setup. And by default, this thing is showing you the audio devices, but what you want is not that part, is the MIDI Studio. So MIDI Studio is another window which is currently opening. And here you have a list of everything that has been at some point connected to your Mac, and you have as well this IAC bus on which I'm gonna double click right now. And this thing should be set up, so by default I think it's offline, but you're gonna make it online. You can give it the name you want. Here is IAC bus is the default name thing, and you have to create at least one bus. It's probably already here by default. And that's it. If you're under Windows, then you have to download the Loop MIDI software, and it's gonna be the same procedure. You just open Loop MIDI after installation of the software, and then you just add one Loop MIDI port, and you're good to go. Of course, under Windows, IAC bus is always active because it's part of the system. And Windows, you have to have Loop MIDI running if you want it to work, of course. So you have to start it before you start your DAW or at startup of the computer. But it's pretty simple. So you got the link for Loop MIDI in the description. So here we go. We're gonna set up the GridFather on Logic. I'll just create a new empty project, and I'm going to choose an external instrument. So this one is usually found in utility, external instrument, and going to be stereo. So the MIDI destination will be my IAC bus. MIDI channel, I want to get to send all the channels, and there is no input as it's not connected to any physical synth. And on that same track, I'm going to add as a MIDI effects the GridFather. So here we go. By default, the channel probabilities, even though it doesn't show here, is everything on the first channel. Let's rename that. And there are two things that you have to do before you start to make sure that it's going to work okay. Is in the project settings, on the recording, you have to activate the auto demix by channel to make sure that the notes which are sent to all the channels are creating different MIDI region on each of them, and not just one region, which would cause all the channels playing at the same time. And the second thing I usually do when I'm using this tool is to activate in the MIDI menu the chase notes, as when you're using the GridFather, usually you're gonna have a long long note, like 16 bars on one MIDI region. So if you start playback in the middle of that note, if the chase is not activated, the note won't be triggered at all. So what you're gonna do is make sure that this note is triggered. This is the option to select for that. So on this channel, I'm just creating one MIDI region, which will only contain one note, which is what I'm going to define as my root note. So this note will last for the whole region. There we go. And I'm gonna loop that section. Next, you wanna add the instruments. So I'm gonna add a software instrument. I'm gonna select a synth. Let's take Spire. And this one's gonna be Grid 1. I'm gonna add another one. This time I'm gonna select, let's say, Serum. It's gonna be Grid 2. And so for the third one, I'm gonna select a third synth. Let's say I'm gonna choose whatever. So I'm gonna select Vital. There we go. So we have these 3 tracks. For the sake of simplicity, I'm gonna put them in a track stack. And now is the thing, I want to make Grid 1 listening only to channel 1, Grid 2 to channel 2, and Grid 3 to channel 3. So I'm gonna go into these tracks, and in the inspector menu, select the channel to which I'm listening. So as you see, channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, and it shows on the track list. Now, the last thing I have to do is to make sure that these tracks are actually listening to what's happening. So I'm going to put all in record mode. And now, whatever I'm going to play here is going to be routed out to the external channel, the IEC bus, and come back here. So I've set up nothing, so channel 1 will be the only one playing for now. Let's open the interface and tweak it a bit. So let's add some notes for the 3 channels, so each of them will play. So all my channels are in record mode. To make sure that we are properly listening, I'm going to pan this one left, this one right, and this one in the middle, so we can figure out where the sound is coming from. Simple. Let's make sure that the sound does not happen always changing channels each note, because it can be a bit fatiguing. So let's say I'm going to have at least between 1/8 and 1/4 of each channel playing. So you see that we're going to hear several notes from each channel. So there we go. Now I can make a record and just press record. My tracks are armed, so they're gonna record what's happening. Enough. So you see, during the recording it seemed like all the notes were coming to Grid 3, but they were not, because I have this demux activated, so at the end the notes are splitted into their proper destination. So now if I just deactivate the GridFather, or on the external instrument, then if I just press play and replay that, I'm gonna listen to that exact sequence. Pretty simple, huh? So that's it for the setup and the logic. So now let's do this setup under Cubase. I'm gonna create an empty project. So under Cubase, you actually don't need to use an IAC bus or a loop MIDI because you got everything you need in the internal routing. You just need to do that properly. So let's first add an instrument track, and we're gonna add the GridFather. So whatever the version, let's take the VST 3. There we go. And we're gonna add one region with just one note. So it's gonna be a full note happening throughout the whole region. So that's gonna be my root note. And then I'm gonna create the my actual instrument. So I'm gonna grab Serum. Second one's gonna be Vital. And the third one will be let's say Kniphonium. Let's rename these. So it's gonna be Grid 1. Grid 2. Sorry. And Grid 3. So now we're gonna make this track listen to what's outputted by the first one. So now what we want to do is select all tracks and have them listening to the GridFather sync MIDI out. So if you press, I think that's Alt Shift, then you just change them all at the same time. Yeah, Alt Shift and will allow you to select them all. But what you want to do then is to have them listen to only one channel. So to do that, you're gonna need the input transformer, which is there, and activate it local. And you get some presets which have been provided. So channel filtering past channel 1. This is what you want. Grid 1 will only pass channel 1. And don't forget to activate the module because by default it's not activated. For channel 2, we're gonna do exactly the same, except that we're gonna select channel 2, activate the module. And for the third one, I'm gonna activate channel 3 only, activate the module. And that's it. Next step is let's just make this sequence loop, and we want to make these 3 tracks armed, so we select them 3 to make sure that they are listening to what's actually going on. And now if I press play, I'm gonna listen to only the first one because the other one are not activated in the GridFather. Let's give it a try. Effectively. So let's say that I'm gonna put this one panned left to hear the difference, this one in the center, and this one pan right. And in the GridFather, I'm gonna open the interface of the plugin, and now I'm gonna add some percentage on the 3 first channel which I want to listen to, making sure that I'm not arming this one, because if I arm this one, then it's gonna send notes and gonna receive its notes in the same time, so it's gonna screw everything up and it will not work as you want. So just select the 3 channels here and press play. Okay, so there we go. Let's get back here and just try to record what's actually happening. And now here we go. We have these 3 grids with their 3 own notes, so I can For now, I can deactivate the plugin. And if I play back, I'm gonna mute this thing as well. And if I play back, then I'm gonna listen to exactly what we just heard. And there we go. Okay, so let's do the setup of the GridFather in Bitwig. I'm gonna create a new project. Let's remove this track. First track is gonna be GridFather, so I'm gonna add the device there. And then I'm gonna add on top of that the hardware instrument, because I'm gonna use the IC bus, so hash hardware instrument after the GridFather. And this one will be routed to the IC bus, and I want to have keep channel because I don't want to map anything channel wise, no audio input because it doesn't make sense. And now I'm gonna create a MIDI clip. Only one note. And let's activate the loop on that MIDI clip only. Okay, now we're gonna add the instrument tracks. Let's add a serum. Then let's say I'm gonna add a spire. And let's say the third one's gonna be whatever, say vital. That's gonna be grid 1, grid 2, and grid 3. So again, we want to, as in all those, we want to make sure that these things are actually listening to the IEC bus. So this is not listening to all ends, but only to, yeah, I need to add the controller because in Bitwig, if you haven't declared the IEC bus, it's not available as a source. So I'm gonna click on Add Controller, and I'm gonna add the oh, it's already present. Sorry, it's not physical control. Yeah, you're gonna add the this one, which is already present, which is the IEC bus 1, and this is the one I wanna use. And now it's gonna be available there. And here it's very simple because I'm selecting the IEC bus channel 1 for the grid 1. Then this channel 2 is gonna select the IEC bus channel 2, and grid 3 is going to listen to IEC bus channel 3, and we should be good to go. So I'm selecting the 3 tracks so they are armed, and now press play. So we only have the first one playing because it's the only one which has been set up in the plugin. So let's open the plugin interface and add some probabilities for the 3 channels to make sure that all of them are selected. I'm going to select again my 3 tracks, arm them, and press play. Okay. So now we can try and record. Let's go. And there we go. So we have the 3 different MIDI clip corresponding to each of the grid instruments, completely split. So this is the setup in the Bitwig. So welcome to this tutorial to the GridFather. The project setup been covered in the rest of this presentation. So we're gonna focus now on the interface itself. So I have a project running inside of Logic with some basic kick and bass. The bass is from the Mute Production pack, snare and open and close hat, and I only have one instance of the GridFather which has been set up and playing F. So my track is on F. So let's now just listen to the track without any sound. I can reduce the snares and perks a bit. Good. Now let's get to the grid. So it's inside of this summon stack. And all these have been set up properly to listen to the channels. Let's open the interface of the plugin. So I've set up some probabilities here on each of the channels. So meaning that this one have a slightly higher chance to be played than this one, which has low probability. And here the section tells the GridFather that each note, for each note, a new channel should be selected. So usually you won't have two consecutive notes on the same grid. Let's put all these tracks on record. So I'll just select them all and press ARM. And if I just press play, we will get some sound normally. Yeah, I'm not having any sound, so let's make sure that, yeah, I need to select the IAC bus because I've changed that routing a bit. So let's select on my external instrument the IAC bus and press play again. Okay, so if I go a bit on the interface, let's start with the random step sequencer, which is there, in which you will be able to select the note lengths that you want to trigger. So here 16ths, 18ths, and the probability and or the weight, if you wish, of all these notes. So 100%, so it means that approximately 1/2 of the time we'll be playing 1/16 and 1/8. The new thing that you get on 1.4 on this part is the availability of the triplet section. So you can do 8 triplets, and as well you have the 16s dotted and the 8 dotted as well, plus the 4 dotted and basically all the dotted value, which will not present on version 1.3. So make sure you upgrade and the triplet if you on that kind of stuff. If you want to trigger some, if you're on a triplet section of your track, then you can use the GridFather as well. So for now, let's just add a bit of 16s dotted. Next section hasn't changed in comparison to previous version. Can go on it a little bit. So here's the overall play probability. So each time the sequencer is supposed to trigger something, then it's gonna play or not depending on that knob. So if this is to 0, then nothing will happen. And if I increase that, I will increase the density of the playing engine. Next is the gate lengths of each of the notes. So let's say that I'm triggering an 8 note, then if my gate length is locked on half on 50%, then my gate length will be 50% of these 8, so it's going to be 116. So let's give it a try, like that. Increase the probability. So here you see that the triggered is the 8 and the gate is halfway. Same for the velocity. For each note, velocity will be chosen at random between these two values. Never mind if they are on the opposite side, I mean, it's going to anyway select between 26 and 127 in this case, so don't hesitate. So then the CC modulation, you got the possibility of controlling one CC modulation value and send that on the IAC bus as well. So if your target plugin is able to listen to CC modulations, then you can control and modulate these values like with something which is similar to an attack and decay envelope. So typically, if I want to select mod wheel, which is control number 1, it's going to select and send random values on the mod wheel with an attack and a decay. So let's say attack minimum and decay to 15 milliseconds. And it's going to be the same if I want to use the pitch bend. Not that you usually will want to send some random pitch bend to the to your plugins, because the sound could be a bit of a nightmare, but on many plugins you have the possibility to set the pitch bend maximum and minimum to 0, meaning that the pitch bend will not actually change the tuning of the target, but you still have the pitch bend as a modulation source, so you can use this as well, complementary to the mod wheel modulation and the velocity, which are the two parameters which usually you find on the matrix. You can use as well the pitch bend. So again, you have the rest value, which is the value when no note is playing, and you have the minimum and maximum value, which will be selected at random with an attack and decay as well. I'm not going to activate that right now. And next one is the transposition section. My root note here is F2, but sometimes you want to have the plugin playing something which is not only that root note. So here you can set various probabilities for each of the note above this one. So this is the root note, which is by default played, and this is the root note plus 1 semitone, plus and root note plus 2 semitones, etc., up to 11 semitones. If you're not really familiar with all the scales and all that stuff, there is this convenient menu here. If you know at least the name of the scale that you want to use, typically major Phrygian for me, you're gonna just select this one, and it's gonna tweak the knobs for you and enter the proper values that correspond to that scale. The transpose probability is like the play probability for each note which actually is played. The GridFather will decide if this note should be the root note, 0, or should be a transpose note, and in that case it's going to select one of these according to the probabilities. You can as well scale all that up in octaves above, so up to 5 octaves above at random. So if I say 2, then it's going to be happening on the bass octave, or 1 octave above, or 2 octave above. And finally, in the channels probability that you have already seen, will split the time spent playing on each of the grid parts. The per channel phrase is maybe a bit trickier to explain. If I was just playing as it is now, then for each note triggered by the sequencer, the GridFather would select one different channel. So it could be something that you want, but it would also be a bit of a mess, because if you have 8 channels, so you're gonna have one note of grid 1, one note of grid 3, etc., etc. Sometimes we'll have a bit more consistency in what's playing, so you can say, okay, I want to change the channels, but not every note. So I'm going to say that each sequence, each phrase would happen at least for an 8 and maximum for a quarter. So whatever the GridFather does is going to spend at least 1/8 on the channel in which it is in, and maximum 1/4. That's it. What I've added as well here is on this slowdown section. It's a global knob that will slow down everything which is happening inside the plugin, so you can have the exact same sequence but playing twice slower. But I've added on this version the odd values, so you have 3 times and 6 times as well, so you can, and 12 as well. So it means that you can have something which is playing 3 times slower. It can give some weird stuff, but sometimes you might want to experiment on that. And finally, the main point of this whole update is the random engine. If you're familiar with my Max for Live devices, you know that I have added this like a few months ago, the possibility to have something which is created randomly, but that you can reproduce easily. And so you are not afraid anymore to lose a sequence that you just heard because it's just past and now it's something else. So you have a possibility to freeze what's actually going on. So you have, it's pretty simple. So first is this new. This will force the sequencer to create a new sequence. But anyway, if the freeze mode is not activated, then this is going to happen randomly. So every 2 bars, the system will just retrigger a new sequence and play that sequence. So you see here the history of the past sequence, the 5 past sequence, and you have the possibility to select a sequence if you click on the so if you just missed a sequence that just passed a few seconds ago, you can just copy that, press freeze, and you can paste it in the SID engine. So now I'm forcing the system to come back to the sequence that I've written here. So I'm looping for two bars. Let's say I'm gonna loop for 1 bar, and let's have a listen at what it does now. It should be looping 1 bar approximately. So there are some things that are happening on my synth, which make it a bit difficult to see that it's looping. So let's make something a bit cleaner. Let's say I'm gonna loop 1.8s and 1 bar. Let's just give it a try with a new sequence. So you hear that sometimes it doesn't seem to loop the exact 1 bar that you are asking. Is that because your notes, which are happening consecutively, might overlap above the grid, the random engine loop that you have requested. So if I'm playing 1/8 dotted and my note is happening just above that bar, then the system will restart, but it will restart just after that note. So it's going to take a bit of more of time to switch back. So again, it's going to loop, but maybe 2 bars or maybe 3 bars, depending on the generated sequence. If you just select a new sequence, then you have a good chance that it's going to get back to what you want. But if I just reduce this value, you're going to hear that it's going to be tighter. Let's get back to previous one. you hear that we are playing back the previous sequence. I switch to the next one. So if I slow down everything, you're gonna hear that's gonna be the same sequence, but happening slower. And there we go. So you can save your presets here. Save as. So it's going to save the whole thing, including the pattern here. So if you reload, you supposedly will get that same sequence back when project reloading. And you can as well increase or decrease the size of the interface in case it doesn't match your screen size. Yeah, I think that's it. Just these reset buttons to get back to default values, and that's it. So okay, like here, just what can I be missing in this presentation? So you can select other elements, not the mod wheel. Typically, you can say the expression or whatever CC you want. Most of them are available and are not used. Some MIDI CC, they are by default assigned on some plugins. Typically Silence has default CC mapping, so it's really up to you to decide which one you want to use, and depending on the synth you are using. And that's it for me, so thank you for your attention, take care.